Her daughter-in-law seated her near the kitchen, at the wedding Virginia paid for. She wore a shawl she stitched herself, sipped sweet tea like it was wine, and said nothing. Melissa, her late husband's niece, gave the toast. Peter, her own son-in-law, made the jokes. They thought she was just a guest. By the time the cake was cut, Virginia had filed the clause that revoked their legacy, every discount, privilege, and founding family claim. She'd raised their children, paid their bills, built the beams they stood beneath. Now she would take back her name, one signature at a time. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The air was syrupy with magnolia and violin strings. White peonies floated in tall glass vases, their petals trembling with every gust of the late September wind. The chairs on the lawn were bone white, arranged in perfect rows, their cushions gleaming under the sunlight like untouched snow. A soft quartet played something classical, Vivaldi maybe, and the hush of the gathering crowd had that brittle kind of quiet reserved for moneyed weddings and whispered judgments. Virginia arrived before anyone expected her to. She stepped out of her rented Hyundai in a lavender shawl she'd sewn herself from repurposed curtains. It didn't match the Pinterest beige color palette of the event. The heels she wore were a decade old and pinched at the sides, but she walked like they belonged to her. Her makeup was light, her gray roots showed. Her nails, short and bare. She'd tied her hair into a loose bun with a tortoiseshell clip that had once belonged to her sister. Nobody rushed to greet her. The young woman in white, Hannah, was still inside, likely fussed over by makeup artists, bridesmaids, and the kind of mother who insists on perfection like it's currency. Virginia glanced at the glossy event signage staked into the grass. Hannah and Michael, 2 p.m. ceremony, reception to follow. She let herself drift toward the seating area. From behind the champagne cart, Melissa emerged. Her face tightened into a smile so thin it might have been a paper cut. She wore a coral sheath dress with pearls at the neck, like armor. "Oh," she said, "didn't know you'd come so early." Virginia tucked the edge of her shawl beneath her elbow. Traffic was light. Melissa glanced over her shoulder toward the catering staff. "We're, still sorting out the seating chart. Why don't you just grab any seat near the kitchen? The rest are taken." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a soft excommunication. Virginia nodded, not even pretending to argue. "Near the kitchen it is." A man from the catering crew, a college kid with acne and a panicked smile, scrambled to make room near the back. The clatter of folding chairs dragged across the lawn, loud and clumsy in the hush. Someone adjusted the linens. Someone else fetched an extra seat cushion. Nobody made eye contact. She thanked them gently, though no one seemed to hear it. And then she sat, from this seat, the one near the kitchen tent, behind the speakers and barely facing the aisle. She watched as the people she once considered family filed in and avoided her. Someone she recognized from church gave a hesitant wave, then turned abruptly to talk to a woman in heels too high for lawn seating. A cousin she hadn't seen in years walked past with her daughter, whispering something that made the girl giggle and glance back. Virginia smiled anyway, even when the child turned away. A waiter passed with a tray of sweet tea. She accepted a glass, held it in her lap like a sacred thing, and sipped. The sugar clung to the back of her throat. She didn't flinch. Far across the lawn, beyond the rows of white folding chairs, beneath the shadow of the gazebo wrapped in tulle and fairy lights, stood a man she hadn't seen in 20 years, Coulter Vance. Time had wrung the youth from his face, but not the sharpness. His salt and pepper hair was combed back in military neatness, and he wore a navy sport coat like it was stitched to his bones. He didn't approach, didn't smile, just nodded once, slow, deliberate, as if acknowledging a truth that neither of them had the energy to speak aloud. Her hand tightened around the glass. She nodded back, and in that single exchange, a lock unclicked. Somewhere behind her, a cork popped. Laughter rose like smoke from a table too far to reach. Virginia sat alone in the seat she never chose, sipping sweetness she didn't ask for, already feeling the weight of something about to turn. The quartet shifted into something lighter, Debussy maybe. Guests settled into their seats with the quiet shuffle of linen skirts and polished shoes. From her corner near the kitchen tent, Virginia watched them glide across the grass, all soft laughter and sunlit smiles. Porcelain perfect. She sipped the last of her tea and set the glass on the grass beside her. A fly buzzed around it, then vanished. Behind her, the flap of the catering tent rustled open. Elias stepped out, sleeves rolled, black tie loosened. He carried a clipboard in one hand and a pair of sunglasses in the other. His eyes scanned the crowd once before settling on her. "You're early," he said. "I'm invisible," she replied, not turning. "That's the preferred arrival time for ghosts." Elias snorted and pulled over a folding chair beside her. "Melissa, no." Virginia tilted her head slightly. "Melissa assumes a lot of things. Always has." He tapped the clipboard against his knee. "She thinks you sold the place years ago." "Doesn't she?" Virginia glanced at the edge of the tent, where the staff bustled with hors d'oeuvres and champagne flutes. "That's what she wanted to believe. I never corrected her." "You kept the majority?" he asked quietly. 51%, she said. "Filed under V. Dalton, Revocable Trust, dated June 3, 1988, right after we poured the first foundation slab. Coulter and Noel signed it with tequila breath and dirt under their nails." Elias let out a low whistle. "Jesus! You let them host her wedding here, knowing." Virginia smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I even covered 30% of the cost, through the family trust. Labeled it a heritage gift. Melissa's wedding planner called it quaint." Elias shook his head in disbelief, jaw tight with barely concealed admiration. "So you're not a guest?" "You're the landlord." "Technically," she said. "I'm both. But don't tell Melissa. She'd spill champagne on herself." They sat in silence for a moment, the string music folding into the breeze. Down by the arch, Hannah appeared in her dress. Ivory lace, fitted bodice, the kind of gown a girl dreams of before she knows what those dreams might cost. The guests let out a collective sigh. Phones rose like sunflowers tilting toward light. Elias nudged Virginia with his elbow. "Does Coulter know you're still on the title?" "Coulter knows exactly how many signatures are missing from that contract," she said. "He always knew." As if summoned, Noelle appeared through the side path, wearing a black dress too sleek for daylight and heels that sunk gently into the turf. Her auburn hair was pinned in a twist, her lipstick the color of dried roses. She didn't look at anyone but Virginia. She pulled up the other chair without asking. "They're already drunk on their own smugness," Noelle said, fanning herself with the program. "Melissa gave me that same kitchen seat nonsense. Thought I might upset the aesthetic." Virginia raised a brow. "You? Upset anything?" "Shocking, I know." Elias leaned in. "You brought the documents." Noelle opened her clutch. Tucked behind a tissue and a roll of mints was a cream-colored folder. Thick, original ink. Paper slightly yellowed. "Article 7, Section C," she said. "Breach of decorum. Clause states, should any stakeholder or their designate be publicly maligned, undermined, or dishonored on premises, recourse may include immediate contract forfeiture." "Want me to read it from the arch?" Virginia reached over and closed the clutch gently. "Not yet. Let them toast their mistake first." From the front row, Melissa raised her glass to the crowd, her coral dress almost glowing under the late afternoon sun. Her voice lifted into a half-drunk, half-rehearsed speech about legacy, love, and enduring family ties. Virginia's eyes didn't leave her. "Let them say all their pretty words," she said. "We'll write the last line." And as the crowd erupted in claps and the officiant stood to begin the ceremony, Coulter Vance looked up from his spot at the edge of the lawn. He wasn't watching the bride. He was watching Virginia. And this time, he smiled. The reception hall was a cathedral of reclaimed barnwood and chandeliers made from antique wine barrels. Rustic, curated, expensive. The kind of venue that tried hard to look effortless. Guests milled beneath the amber lights like moths, each balancing a stemmed glass and a filtered smile. Hannah and Michael danced through them in bursts of white and navy, stopping only for photos or praise. Her veil shimmered like tinsel every time she turned toward the flash. Virginia found her seat again, same one by the Caterers station, next to a column wrapped in eucalyptus. She hadn't been moved, hadn't been invited forward. Her name wasn't even written on the seating chart at the door, but she sat poised and still, her clutch nestled in her lap. Dinner was served in waves, braised short ribs, whipped parsnips, something citrusy on the salad that clung to the tongue. She ate quietly, unnoticed, watching the choreography of privilege unfold in front of her like theater. Then Peter's voice cracked the hum. "She's just here for attention." The words weren't whispered. They weren't subtle. They landed sharp and flat like dropped silverware. Heads turned halfway, then stopped. Smiles froze. Forks hovered in midair. Peter sat 3 tables up, already deep into his 3rd glass of red. His wife tried to hush him with a hand on his arm, but he swatted it off like a fly. She couldn't stand that someone else was finally getting the spotlight. "Look at her, back there like a damn shadow." Laughter followed. But it wasn't real laughter. It was the brittle, uneasy kind people use when they want to signal they're in on the joke, even if it curdles something inside them. One of the caterers, a young woman with nervous eyes and a nose ring, froze mid-pour. Her eyes darted toward Virginia, wide and apologetic, as if she'd said the words herself. Virginia didn't flinch. Her hands remained folded over her clutch. She'd known Peter since he was a boy with crooked teeth and an obsession with matches. Time hadn't made him smarter, just louder. Hannah didn't hear any of it. She was at the sweetheart table with Michael, surrounded by a halo of bridesmaids and ring lights. A photographer crouched low to capture a mock candid of her biting into cake while laughing. She looked radiant, untouchable, exactly how she'd always wanted to be seen. Noelle passed by Virginia's table, pausing briefly. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Instead, she placed one hand, cool, steady, on Virginia's shoulder. It lingered for 2 seconds. Then she moved on. Up on the 2nd-floor balcony, Coulter stood with a whiskey in hand, watching the scene unfold below. His tie had been loosened, his face unreadable. When Virginia's eyes met his, he didn't look away. He raised his glass, just slightly, no flourish, a silent gesture. And that was all she needed. With the room still buzzing from Peter's outburst, with Melissa leaning in to whisper something giddy and cruel to her cousin, with Hannah's laughter echoing in time to a camera shutter, Virginia unlatched the clasp of her clutch. Inside, tucked beneath a lipstick she hadn't used and a folded handkerchief stitched with the initials VD, was a black envelope. Matte, heavy paper, no name on the front. She took it out, ran her finger along the edge. Noelle saw it from across the room. Her head tilted slightly. Elias, seated 2 tables over with his jacket slung over the chair, stopped mid-chew when he noticed it. His fork slowly lowered to the plate. The envelope looked like nothing, but in Virginia's hand, it became something tectonic. She didn't open it, not yet. Instead, she placed it upright against her water glass, where anyone walking by might notice, where Melissa might notice. Where Peter, if he sobered up long enough, might remember what kind of woman they'd underestimated. From the dance floor, the band kicked into a jaunty cover of Fleetwood Mac's Little Lies. The tempo was wrong, but the crowd didn't care. They spilled onto the wood like bubbles from shaken champagne. Virginia remained seated, watching them twirl and clink and pose. The envelope stayed where it was, dark as ink, patient as consequence. She picked up her fork, took another bite of the parsnips, chewed slowly, and as she swallowed, a ripple moved through the room. Not a gust, not a sound. Just the sense, unmistakable, that the center of gravity had shifted. The envelope remained untouched beside Virginia's water glass, its shadow long under the flicker of votives. The wedding rolled on around her, rosé flowing. Laughter stitched into every corner, the playlist veering into nostalgic pop that drew even the reluctant dancers to the floor. Elias appeared again, quiet as ever. This time, he didn't sit, just stood behind her chair, arms folded, the clipboard replaced with a folded document tucked beneath his arm. "No movement yet," he murmured. "They haven't noticed," Virginia replied, her voice calm. "Or they're pretending not to." He nodded once. Clause 14B's still active. She turned her head slightly. "You checked the filings. Last revised in 2006. All governing policies intact. Breach of venue decorum, particularly mistreatment of managing members, constitutes default." She considered that. "So I could file tonight." "You could have filed the minute Peter opened his mouth," Elias said, gaze scanning the room. But you haven't, Virginia smiled faintly. Not until the cake. From across the hall, Noelle approached, weaving around a tower of champagne glasses and a photographer barking for the wedding party to gather. She reached their table and didn't sit, just leaned a hand on the back of Virginia's chair. "Want me to prep the paperwork?" she asked in a low voice. "I've got a laptop in my car and a hotspot strong enough to rattle teeth." Virginia glanced at the cake table. 5 tiers, frosted in ivory buttercream, sugar flowers curling around each layer like porcelain vines. A gold monogram perched delicately on top, shimmering under the lights. After the first cut, Virginia said, "Let them have their picture." Noelle gave a single nod and disappeared again, her heels soft against the old pine floors. Up by the front, Melissa stood near the flower wall with a local reporter, one of those lifestyle columnists who floated between galas and garden tours, always dressed in linen and armed with soft focus lenses. "This space means everything to our family," Melissa said, her voice just loud enough to carry. "Truly, we've been coming here for years. It's legacy." The reporter, smiling, jotted something down on a rose gold iPad. Melissa pressed a manicured hand to her chest like she was pledging allegiance. "And to host Hannah's wedding here, it just felt right, like a full circle moment, you know?" Virginia took a sip of her water. "Full circle's one word for it," she muttered. Further down the table, Peter was now holding court with 2 men in sports coats and thinning hairlines. His face was flushed with drink, his voice booming. "We locked in this venue for pennies," he said, slapping the back of his chair. "I mean, you wouldn't believe the deal." Melissa made a few calls, pulled some strings, and boom, family discount. One of the men laughed. "I thought you had to book this place a year out minimum." Peter shrugged like a man who'd never read fine print. "Not if you know the right people." Elias didn't react, just watched, like a man waiting for a slow fuse to reach the powder. Virginia leaned back slightly. "You know what I remember," she said softly. "When Melissa was 16, she begged us to build a second gazebo. Wanted a place for romantic moments. We said no. She cried for 3 days." Elias let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "That tracks." "She used to run barefoot through this place," Virginia went on. "No manners, no sense of consequence. And now she's standing over there, holding court like she built the damn beams with her own hands." Elias reached into his pocket and slid a flash drive onto the table next to her clutch. "Everything's on there. Contract scans, original tax filings, photo of the deed in your name, time-stamped." Virginia didn't touch it. She didn't need to. Across the room, the band cut out. A hush rippled through the reception hall. Hannah stood by the cake, beaming, a knife in one hand, Michael's hand in the other. Cameras pointed. Bridesmaids cooed. Someone cheered. The knife sliced through frosting. Flashbulbs flared. "Now," Virginia said. Elias straightened. Noelle, already in motion, was heading for the exit. And Melissa, still mid-interview, turned just slightly toward the wrong table and caught sight of the black envelope, standing like a tombstone between wine glasses. Her smile faltered. Virginia didn't blink. At 9:17 p.m., beneath the twinkle lights strung across cedar beams and mason jars, filled with tea candles, Virginia signed her name. The ink dried slow and clean across the notarized breech filing. A second signature followed, Elias's, his pen steady, his face unreadable. The digital timestamp locked itself into the metadata the second the form scanned into the system. Noelle didn't speak. She just clicked once on her laptop. A soft ping followed. Then it was done. 3 keystrokes in a back hallway of a wedding venue she helped build in 1988, and the Cobb family's status as preferred partners was gone. Virginia exhaled. Not a sigh of relief, just release. In the reception hall, the DJ had traded retro hits for top 40 ballads. Couples slow danced. A toddler curled asleep in her mother's lap. Hannah was already halfway out of her gown, tucked behind a velvet curtain with her bridesmaids, changing into a sequined jumpsuit for the after-party. None of them knew yet, not officially, but the venue's back-end system did. As per the founding charter, Clause 14b took immediate effect upon formal filing. All special access codes, grandfathered rates, and family designations tied to the Cobb lineage, Melissa, Peter, and their descendants, were instantly suspended, forever. Elias walked out of the office suite with his phone in hand. At 9:24 p.m., he hit send. An email titled, Notice of Revocation, Cobb Family Status, arrived in both Melissa and Peter's inboxes before either of them reached their cars. It was formal, crisp, legal, and unshakably final. At 9:31 p.m., Coulter logged into the venue's master ledger from his home office, where he'd quietly slipped out to make the edit himself. The red ink was instant. Family, Cobb, status, revoked, as of 09/21/2117, EST. Access terminated. He leaned back in his leather chair, eyes scanning the lines. His finger hovered for a second, before dragging the family's Access tab to the archived folder. No backup copies were saved. Meanwhile, across the hall from the catering kitchen, Noelle clicked through to the last screen of the administrative panel. She flipped one drop-down menu. Cobb, founding family public rate tier. That one stung more than the email. It meant every future Cobb bride or cousin or friend of the family would be charged the full published rate. No perks, no early access, no comped rehearsal dinners, just invoices. The same way strangers paid. By 10:03 p.m., the wedding began to wind down. The cake was reduced to crumbs. Hannah and Michael had already waved their goodbyes, dragging a sparkler-lit procession of cheering guests to the waiting black SUV near the gravel exit. Virginia stayed seated, one hand over her purse. She didn't need to move, didn't need to say a word. The echo of what she'd done was still making its way through the bones of the place. She saw Melissa check her phone by the flower wall. Saw her freeze, read, scroll. Read again. Peter leaned in to ask what was wrong. She didn't answer. At 10:17 p.m., the SUV pulled out onto the long, oak-lined driveway. Inside, Hannah finally kicked off her heels and leaned back against the cool leather seats, glowing and exhausted. She was halfway through swiping through tagged Instagram photos when she noticed her mother's face, rigid, pale, her lips twitching over words that never made it out. "Mom?" Hannah asked, nudging her. "What happened?" Melissa didn't speak, so Hannah reached across and took her phone. The screen was still open. The email subject line unreadable in full, truncated by the mail app. But the bolded words beneath it were enough to scorch, "All Cobb family privileges revoked. Effective immediately." Hannah blinked. Her throat dried. "Mom," she said, softer now. "What did you do?" The SUV kept driving. Neither of them answered. The knock came just after 4 p.m. It was a Wednesday, midweek quiet, the kind of stillness only a shoulder season could offer. The reception hall stood empty, sun filtering through stained glass transoms onto polished pine floors. Outside, the oak leaves had begun to turn, gold and rust catching in the breeze. Virginia was in the small back office. She didn't flinch when the knock came. She simply closed her ledger, wiped her flour-dusted hands on her apron, and walked to the front. Melissa stood on the porch, overdressed for October in a silk blouse and block heels, her makeup too carefully applied, like it was hiding something rather than enhancing it. Virginia opened the door fully. No smile, no invitation, just space. Melissa stepped in anyway. "I wasn't sure if you'd be here," she said, trying for warmth but landing somewhere closer to rehearsed. "I live here," Virginia replied. "You knew that once." Melissa looked around the lobby, at the vintage chandelier Virginia had rescued from a demolition sale, at the framed black and white photos of the original build team, her own mother's young face in the corner of one shot. She barely lingered. "I wanted to talk," she said, face to face. Virginia gestured toward the tea cart. "Sit if you'd like. I made shortbread." Melissa blinked, surprised. "I remember you liked lemon," Virginia added. "Still do?" Yeah, I do." They sat across from each other at the small round table beside the fireplace, the tea already steeping. Virginia poured carefully, setting a plate of cookies between them like peace offerings. Melissa took one, but didn't eat. "I'm sorry," she said finally, "about how everything went. At the wedding, I didn't know you were still involved. If we'd known..." Virginia's voice was even. "You would have invited me to sit closer to the aisle." Melissa winced. "That's not fair." "It's precise," Virginia said. "You ran that day like it was yours to run, like we were strangers. We thought you sold your share. You assumed I would. Melissa looked down at the tea, her hands tight around the cup. Her wedding band tan line was faint but visible. She stared at it like it could explain something. We were trying to modernize the space, she said softly. Give it polish. I guess we thought you wouldn't understand the vision. Virginia let the silence stretch, not cruel, but earned. Melissa looked up. We didn't mean to erase you. It wasn't malicious. We were just trying to make it ours. It was never yours, Virginia said gently. Not to take, not to rewrite. You used my legacy like wallpaper, covered it with florals and Pinterest boards, and called it heritage. I was proud, Melissa said, and for the first time there was a tremor in her voice. I was proud that Hannah got married here, that we made it beautiful, that it meant something to people. I thought you'd be happy, Virginia's eyes stayed on her, steady. You stood in the middle of something I built and pretended you were its foundation. Melissa flinched, and when people asked about how it came to be, Virginia continued. You didn't mention the night I laid tile until my hands bled, or how Coulter and I scrounged through salvage yards to build that arch, or how I used my inheritance to pay off the zoning permits so the bank wouldn't seize the land. You didn't tell the truth, Melissa. Melissa's throat worked. I didn't know how. Virginia finally leaned back, arms folding loosely. No. You just didn't want to give up the story where you were the architect. Melissa broke then, just a hairline crack, her lip trembling, her hands gripping the cup so tightly the china creaked. I didn't mean for it to be cruel. But it was, Virginia said. And not just to me, to Hannah, to yourself. Melissa's voice went quiet. We didn't think you'd want to be involved. I built this place, Virginia said, her voice low and deliberate. So women like me, women who are forgotten, edited out, smiled at but never named, would never again be treated as accessories to someone else's spotlight. Melissa looked down. Virginia rose. You came for forgiveness, not truth. They're not the same. She walked toward the front door, opened it wide. Melissa stayed seated for a beat longer, long enough to understand the invitation was over. Then she stood, shaky but trying to appear composed. At the threshold, she turned. If I'd asked you to help plan the wedding, would you have? Virginia looked her dead in the eyes. No, she said, but I would have told you how not to lose your daughter. And she closed the door. The courtroom wasn't dramatic. It was beige, fluorescent lights, worn carpet. A muted seal of the state of South Carolina framed above the judge's bench like an afterthought. But even in that sterile space, the air felt heavy. Peter Cobb sat with his attorney, tight-jawed, smug-suited, speaking in hushed tones over a manila folder of precedent. Melissa wasn't there. She hadn't shown up. Whether from fear or shame, no one said. Virginia sat 2 rows back with Elias. Noelle flanked her left, calm as a Sunday pew sitter. She didn't clutch papers. She didn't posture. She didn't even bring a purse. At 10:01 a.m., court came to order. Your Honor, Peter's attorney began, standing with the confidence of someone who billed by the hour and believed the truth could be negotiated. We're here today to challenge the enforcement of Clause 14b in the venue's founding charter, specifically its punitive and ambiguous nature. He gestured toward Virginia without ever looking at her. Our position is that this clause, as applied, is both retaliatory and without legal clarity. The language, breach of decorum, is vague, subjective. It opens the door to arbitrary enforcement by Ms. Dalton. Elias leaned forward, calm and cold. May I approach? The judge nodded. Elias handed the bailiff a weathered binder, original charter documents, including the venue's earliest founding notes. Inside were receipts, signed copies, and handwritten amendments made in the margins. Virginia's handwriting, careful cursive, iron-spined and inked with purpose. Clause 14b, dated 1988. Should any stakeholder or guest, through behavior or speech, dishonor or publicly malign a founding member within the premises, said party shall forfeit all privileges and access, immediate and irrevocable. Below it, written in black fountain pen, let this space protect the people who built it, not just the ones who benefit from it. VD. The judge flipped pages, paused. Handwritten annotation, she asked. Elias nodded. By Miss Dalton, preserved in original charter, her words, her paper. Peter's attorney made a strangled sound of protest. Your Honor, this clause is archaic, personal, not procedural. This venue receives public business, to hold a family accountable for an emotional reaction. The judge held up a hand. Mr. Cobb, did you or your wife ever inquire into current ownership status before the wedding? Peter's mouth parted, closed again. Did you pay the full public rate? She asked. No, he admitted. Did you sign an agreement listing Ms. Dalton's name on the final page? Yes, he muttered. Then we'll proceed with the facts. She turned back to the binder. Any further testimony? Elias stepped aside, placing one final document on the clerk's desk. A notarized letter, on parchment paper, edges curled. The signature written in a hand familiar to everyone in the room. Coulter Vance. His words were brief. She wrote those words when I still had dark hair, and I saw the day she put them in the binder. If that clause is standing now, it's because she held this place up longer than any of us did. The judge leaned back in her chair. By 10:37 a.m., the ruling was issued. Clause 14b stood. Ownership of the venue remained fully with Virginia Dalton. All claims by the Cobb family were dismissed. The motion flipped the room. Peter didn't storm out. He didn't say a word, just gathered his briefcase with trembling hands, his face red and expressionless, and followed his attorney out a side door like a man waking from anesthesia. By lunch, the media had it. A local columnist ran the headline first. Charleston matriarch quietly owns venue that erased her. Then it spread. Woman who funded her family's legacy erased until now. Clause 14b, the revenge of the forgotten architect. Virginia didn't read them. She let them pass like weather. But at 7:12 p.m., her phone rang. Unknown number. Georgia area code. She answered anyway. Grandma? Came a voice, soft, uncertain. It was Hannah. I just read everything, she said. All of it, the deed, the charter, the ruling, Her voice caught. I didn't know, I swear I didn't know. Virginia stayed quiet. I'm so sorry, Hannah said again, quieter this time. I should have asked more. About you, about where this place came from. Virginia waited. Then, are you still with him, Michael, the new husband? The one who smiled too wide. A pause. No, Hannah said. Not anymore. Virginia closed her eyes. Somewhere inside her, something unknotted. But she didn't say, it's okay. She didn't let her off the hook. Instead, she asked, You want to know the real story now? Hannah's voice cracked. Yes, she whispered. Please. Virginia didn't want a title, but she signed the papers anyway. Left side of the desk, under the window with the peeling sill, the same one she'd once leaned against in work boots and a sunburn, 27 and defiant. Operational manager, ceremonial, they said, symbolic. But the key they handed her opened every door in the building. Noelle was the first to clap when the ink dried. Elias followed, clapping once, then twice, until the room broke into applause that felt more like breath than celebration. Relief, maybe. Like the walls had been holding something in. The next morning, a hand-lettered sign went up on the staff bulletin board. Welcome home, V. Noelle hugged her outside the catering suite, half apron, half fleece, flower on her elbow. You can still yell at vendors if you want, she said. I left a list. I'll try to pace myself, Virginia replied. But the corner of her mouth twitched. Noelle had already begun stepping back, mentoring two young assistants she called her shadows, both of them wide-eyed and taking notes like apprentices in a sacred kitchen. She'd been quiet about the transition, letting it happen like the slow turn of a season. By Friday, Coulter had logged into the venue's website backend. He didn't say anything. He didn't ask permission. He just went to the About page, the one that had once credited 3 founding families in vague, polished language, and rewrote it line by line. This place wasn't built by families. It was built by hands, Dalton, Vance, Hartwell. No promises, no Pinterest, just wood, sweat, and women who weren't afraid of being loud. He hit publish without ceremony. At 2:34 p.m., the staff group chat lit up with screenshots. No one said much, just strings of heart emojis and a few finally texts that didn't need clarification. Virginia saw it all. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Melissa found out from a client. A well-dressed bride named Lexi was touring the space for a May booking when she said, bright-eyed, "And I just love the new story on your website. About the Hartwell hands? It gave me chills." Melissa blinked. "What website?" Lexi tilted her head. "The venue's site. Your family doesn't run it anymore, right?" Melissa smiled through her teeth. "Of course we do." She didn't finish the tour. That Sunday, Hannah pulled up the gravel drive alone. No SUV, no Michael, just her, in a dusty blue hoodie and jeans. Hair pulled back, a tote bag slung over one shoulder. She didn't call ahead. Virginia saw her through the office window and didn't move. Let her walk the whole length of the porch before opening the door. "I wasn't sure you'd be here," Hannah said. Virginia just stepped aside to let her in. The lobby hadn't changed much since the wedding. Still smelled like cedar and lemon oil. The only difference was the presence, Virginia's quiet gravity at the center of it all, like she'd always been there. "I read the binder," Hannah said. "The contracts, your notes, the bank letters from '88. Virginia nodded once. "What did you think?" "That it was never about money," Hannah said. "It was about credit, visibility. It was about ownership," Virginia said. "And the difference between having it and being allowed to believe you don't?" They sat in the front parlor, where the guest book usually lived. Hannah fidgeted with the sleeve of her hoodie. "I'm transferring," she said. "I withdrew from Savannah. I think I need something smaller. Closer to this." Virginia raised an eyebrow. "I don't want a desk job," Hannah added. "I don't want to host weddings with 3-story cakes and signature cocktails named after dogs. I want to learn how to run something that matters." Silence stretched between them. "Can I intern here this summer?" Hannah asked. "Even just filing contracts or scrubbing floors. I want to earn it." Virginia didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood, crossed the room, pulled an old leather-bound scheduling book from the bookshelf beside the fireplace. She flipped through pages. June, July, August. She pointed at a Monday. "First catering delivery comes in at 6:30. Truck sometimes shows up early." Hannah stood slowly. "I'll be here at 6. Virginia closed the book, slid it back into place. "No breaks for excuses," she said. "I wouldn't dare," Hannah replied. Virginia looked at her granddaughter, really looked. No veil, no spotlight, no husband grinning too wide in staged photos. Just Hannah, raw and reachable. For the first time in months, Virginia let herself smile. And then the front door creaked open. They both turned. Melissa stood on the porch, one hand gripping the railing, lips parted like she'd been mid-sentence before deciding not to finish it. Virginia didn't speak. Neither did Hannah, but neither of them moved. By her third Monday, Hannah had memorized the gate code, the kitchen alarm sequence, and the sound of the front lock sticking when it rained. She arrived at 5:57 every morning, hood up, sneakers muddy, coffee in hand. No selfies, no curated hashtags, just work. Virginia never praised her, but she noticed. How Hannah checked the ice bins before the caterers even unloaded. How she kept her voice calm with vendors who spoke in clipped tones when they thought no one important was listening. How she shadowed without hovering. She was learning. And not just about weddings. She was learning the math. "How much do we spend per guest chair per year?" Virginia asked one morning, sliding a spreadsheet across the front desk. Hannah scanned the cells. "Depends on the chair model, but average depreciation puts us at about $362 per event. And if one breaks, replacement's $139. But we lose more than that in downtime if we're overbooked." Virginia didn't smile, but she slid the second sheet forward, the next week's budget. "Fill in the gaps," she said. "I'll be back after walkthrough." By June, Hannah was sitting in on vendor contract reviews. She stopped painting her nails, switched to a pocket-sized notebook instead of her phone, wore shoes she could move fast in. She asked questions, quietly, but always at the right moment. Virginia began handing her old invoices, crinkled blue carbon copies from the 90s. Ledger pages written in cursive and corrected in red pen. Not glamorous, but real. "This," Virginia said one evening, gesturing to the dusty accordion folder splayed across the kitchen table, "is the part no one photographs." Hannah nodded. "But it's what holds everything up." "Exactly." Their first client event together wasn't a wedding. Not officially. It was a vow renewal. Small. Just the couple, a friend as efficient, and one staff photographer. The bride, Angela, had terminal lymphoma. She wanted to wear her dress again. Not because she believed in fairy tales, but because it still fit, and that felt like something to honor. Angela's family hadn't come, neither had the grooms. There was no drama, just absence. Sometimes that was worse. Virginia oversaw the setup. Simple wildflowers, white folding chairs, lemon bars instead of cake. Hannah helped Angela into her dress, pinning the straps so they wouldn't slip. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice didn't. "You look powerful," she said. Angela's eyes filled. "Not beautiful." "Both," Hannah replied, "but powerful is what stays." After the ceremony, the couple sat under the oak trellis eating pie. The sun was going down. There was no music, just birds and breeze. Hannah watched them for a long time. That night, back in the office, she stayed late, quiet, restless. Virginia didn't push. Finally, Hannah said, "I used to think weddings were about love." Virginia didn't look up. "They are. But you made them about something more," Hannah said. "About worth." Virginia's pen paused. "Same thing," she said, voice low. "When it's earned." Hannah didn't reply, but her hand moved to her phone, screen dark. She held it like a weight. She didn't text, didn't scroll. Eventually, she just put it face down and picked up the scheduling book instead. At the back of the property, near the barn that hadn't been used in a decade, Elias walked the gravel path with a manila folder tucked beneath his arm. The sun was high, his sleeves were rolled. Inside the folder, the venue's updated succession draft. He'd rewritten it after the vow renewal. Not because anyone asked him to, because he saw the look on Virginia's face when Hannah handed over the final invoice. Balanced, signed, triple-checked. Noelle had already given her blessing. Coulter had signed the addendum. All that was left was time. The next morning, a storm rolled in, soft at first, then loud. Thunder clapped as Hannah climbed the back stairs with soaked jeans and an armload of receipts from the florist. She dropped them on the desk, water still dripping from her ponytail. Virginia was already there, sipping coffee. Hannah wiped her face with the edge of her hoodie. "So, what's the policy if a bride wants to add a dove release but hasn't paid the security deposit?" Virginia blinked, then smiled. "You ask her if she's allergic to feathers," she said. Hannah laughed, not loud, but real. Outside, the rain fell harder, but inside, everything was finally coming together. The text came at 9:41 p.m., just 3 words, "Please call me." Hannah stared at it for a long time. She didn't reply. Thursday morning was overcast, humid in the way Charleston mornings get when the storm's passed, but hasn't fully let go. Inside the venue, candles were being tested for a 6 p.m. ceremony, lavender and white, pale roses down the aisle. A bride named Taylor, whose mother had flown in from Boise to micromanage. Hannah was guiding her through the terrace seating when the front doors opened hard. Melissa, hair lacquered, heels sharp, lips already moving before the sound fully caught up. "Excuse me, this walkthrough is not closed. I'm still entitled to attend these. This is our space." Taylor turned, startled. Her mother stiffened, instantly on defense. Hannah stepped in front of them instinctively, blocking the aisle. Her face didn't flinch, but she didn't speak either. Virginia entered from the side door behind the tasting kitchen. She didn't raise her voice. "Melissa," she said, "step outside with me." Melissa blinked like she hadn't seen her until just then. "I just want to see how they're using the patio." "This isn't your tour," Virginia said. "This is a paying client's time. You're disrupting it." A pause. The words landed like a gavel. "I'm still family," Melissa snapped. "And that means something," Virginia said quietly, "but not a discount." They stood on the porch. The air was sticky. Spanish moss shifted overhead like the slow exhale of something watching. Melissa's tone dropped. "You're punishing us." "I'm protecting what I built," Virginia said. "You're confusing the two. I helped with this place. When I was younger, Virginia cut her off with a tilt of her head. Not cruel, just final. "You visited it, you didn't build it." Melissa's mouth opened, closed. Then, "Peter's refiling. He's challenging the trust disbursements. Says the structure's unfair." Virginia didn't even blink. Let him. That afternoon, Virginia gathered the staff in the main hall. The sun had returned, streaking through the tall windows in warm shafts of light. Elias stood beside her. So did Hannah. Virginia didn't hold papers, just truth. Going forward, she said, voice clear but calm, family members will not be granted unpaid access to any event space, documents, or resources unless formally approved through the same channels as our vendors and clients. No one asked why. They'd all lived the answer. Hannah didn't look toward the door, but she knew Melissa had heard every word. A week later, Peter's motion was rejected in probate court. The judge called the trust language airtight, the original filings remarkably thorough for their time. Peter had sat stone-faced, arms crossed, mouth thin. The family name no longer bought deference. It didn't even buy time. That evening, Virginia sat alone on the back porch. The ledger was in her lap, a red pen in her right hand. She was rewriting a policy on vendor lateness, adding a grace period, shaving down the fine. She didn't hear Hannah approach, just felt the cushion beside her shift. You were quiet after the tour, Hannah said. Virginia kept writing. No need to waste words on people who don't listen. Hannah looked out across the lawn, where candles now glowed in hurricane glasses, waiting to be lit. She still thinks she owns part of it, Virginia nodded. She always did. But I never gave her the foundation, just the walls. She capped the pen, looked up. You want to know why that matters? Hannah nodded. Because walls can collapse, Virginia said. But the side that holds the foundation, that survives the storm. And just then, Hannah's phone buzzed again. A text from Melissa, unread, unanswered. Hannah locked the screen, slid the phone into her back pocket. I'm staying late tomorrow, she said. To fix the shelf in cold storage. Virginia smiled, slow and rare. Good, she said. That shelf's been leaning too long. The invitation came printed on heavy cream stock, embossed in gold, the kind of stationery meant to outlive the hands that held it. Historic Preservation Society of Charleston cordially invites you to an evening honoring Virginia Dalton for her enduring architectural and cultural contributions to the Low Country region. Virginia had opened it once, read it, set it down. No dress code, she told Elias. Good. I'm wearing boots. The ceremony was held at the old ferry terminal, now a converted hall with exposed brick, tall windows, and century-old beams that reminded Virginia of the first 2x4s she'd laid in the field behind her sister's house. She arrived 15 minutes early, didn't ask for seating, didn't bring a speech. Hannah stood near the stage in a navy wrap dress and sensible heels, already checking the sound levels with the AV team. Elias flanked her, nodding once as Virginia entered. Noel was there too, arms crossed, eyes scanning the crowd like a general. The room filled slowly. Architects, local historians, members of the board who once forgot Virginia's name when handing out design awards to men she trained. Tonight they all stood when she was called to the stage. The applause wasn't thunderous, but it didn't need to be. It lasted exactly long enough. Behind her, on a mounted screen, played a slow reel of black and white photographs. Virginia in overalls standing on scaffolding. Virginia pouring concrete with bare hands. Virginia in front of the original build permit, taped to a chain-link fence in 1988. The local news had picked it up that morning. A photo from the archives had gone viral. Virginia, arms crossed, sweat on her brow, standing in front of what would become the venue's main archway. Caption: She didn't ask to be remembered. She just refused to be erased. The story had spread. Elias took the podium briefly. He didn't read from notes. Her strength was always in the mortar, he said, voice steady. Not the microphone. The audience stilled. She gave us shelter before she gave us speeches. And the women who stand under that shelter now? They remember. Then he stepped back. Melissa had tried to sit in the second row, but a woman from the preservation board, gray-haired, pearl-clad, had gently redirected her to the side aisle. Reserved, she'd said, without apology. Melissa smiled, too wide, and sat anyway. She'd posted twice that morning, once with an old photo of Virginia and Coulter, captioned, "Grateful for the legacy my family helped build." Once with a close-up of the event program, tagging the venue, the society, and 3 local reporters. But people remembered. They remembered the wedding. They remembered the email. And when Melissa leaned over to whisper something to the woman next to her, the woman just smiled politely and turned away. Finally, Virginia stepped forward. No notes, no podium, just the stage. Just her boots. She took the plaque from the chair of the society, nodded once, and stepped toward the mic. She looked out over the crowd. At the beams, at the women in the room, at Hannah. Then she said only 6 words. This house remembers who respected it. Then she stepped down. The applause returned. This time, it wasn't louder, it was deeper. Earned. Afterward, people lined up. A historian from Savannah wanted to interview her. A reporter from Charleston Now asked for a follow-up feature. Someone's daughter said she wanted to be an architect. Virginia nodded, listened, but didn't say much more. She found her way to the corner of the room, next to the catering table, where the florals weren't quite centered and the napkins had the wrong monogram. Hannah found her there. I cried, she said. Virginia handed her a glass of sweet tea. I saw, she replied. Hannah's eyes were glassy again. You only said 6 words, Virginia shrugged. Didn't need 7. Hannah looked toward the stage, where the plaque now sat on an easel. It's not just the house that remembers, she said. Virginia said nothing, but her hand reached out and rested briefly on Hannah's shoulder. And from across the room, Coulter raised his glass. He didn't smile, but he didn't need to. Later that night, back at the venue, the plaque was placed inside the main hallway, just to the left of the fireplace, where guests would pass it without ceremony day after day. There was no spotlight on it, just a small brass plate beneath, in honor of the hands that built the thing before it was beautiful, and the ones who held it when no one else did. The bride's name was Lila. She was 22, earnest-eyed, and couldn't stop fidgeting with the delicate silver bracelet on her wrist. A graduation gift. Still wore it like it meant armor. This is my dream venue, she said for the 3rd time, standing in the center of the reception hall. I've been saving Pinterest boards since I was 16. Hannah nodded, clipboard in hand, but her gaze drifted toward the wall of windows, where the light fell now, the way it used to land near the kitchen tent, where Virginia had once been exiled to a folding chair. Lila kept talking, something about flower palettes and signature mocktails. Her mother hovered, inserting herself into every logistical detail. Her fiancé was polite but distracted. And yet, Hannah didn't flinch. She smiled when she needed to, redirected when it mattered. She'd seen this dynamic before. She'd lived it. But this time, she was on the other side of the clipboard. Later, after Lila and her entourage had left for cake tasting, Hannah and Virginia walked the hallway in silence. It was midday. The building hummed with its usual soft rhythm. Staff voices behind office doors, the rustle of florals being delivered, a faint jazz track floating in from the AV test run. They passed the very corner where the kitchen staff had once squeezed in an extra seat. It was empty now, on purpose. The table that used to crowd the space had been replaced with a small vintage bench and a framed photo of the original venue build. In it, Virginia stood with one foot propped on a slab of concrete, a hammer in hand, her braid caught mid-swing by the wind. Hannah stopped. You ever sit here and think about that day? Virginia looked at the bench. No. Hannah turned. Why not? I didn't build it to remember the worst seat, Virginia said. I built it so no one else would get placed there. They kept walking. The catering crew was setting up in the tasting kitchen, cinnamon rolls for the bridal brunch. One of the newer servers, no older than 20, caught sight of Virginia and immediately straightened. Morning, Miss Dalton, he said. Do you want to sample the glaze? Virginia paused, raised an eyebrow. Are you asking because I'm the boss, she said, or because I look like I might bite if you don't? The kid froze. Virginia cracked the faintest smile. Relax, I'll take a bite. He exhaled like he'd dodged a guillotine and passed her a warm plate. Hannah leaned against the counter, watching. When I first started, she said, I think they thought you were a myth. Some kind of story the staff told to keep people in line. Virginia chewed thoughtfully. And now, they bake you cinnamon rolls before sunrise. Virginia dabbed her mouth with a paper napkin. Still prefer lemon shortbread. In the front office, Hannah opened Lila's digital floor plan. One table, still marked head, was highlighted in yellow. Her mom wanted her childhood piano teacher at the head table, Hannah said. Because apparently she sang at the 6th grade recital. Virginia snorted. That woman isn't even RSVPing yes. I checked the pre-screen list. Then I get to override. Virginia leaned over the desk. Who's taking the seat? Hannah didn't look up as she typed. You are. Virginia arched a brow. At the head? Hannah nodded. Front and center. There was a beat of silence. Then Virginia said, This time I'll own the table. And they both laughed. Not a polite chuckle, not the shallow kind used at networking events or family brunches. This one had weight, history. Hannah's eyes watered from it. Virginia just leaned back in her chair, satisfied. That night, after everyone left, Hannah walked the hall again. No clipboard, no tasks, just steps, memory, ownership. She passed the fireplace, where the plaque still sat beneath the brass plate. She traced her fingers along the frame, then looked back, through the windows, through the darkness, to the spot by the kitchen. Empty, still. She pulled out her phone, typed one message. Bride's table finalized. Virginia's seat confirmed. No substitutions. Then she turned off the lights. And for the first time, she didn't double-check the locks. She knew the house would hold. It arrived on a Wednesday, a cream envelope, the kind that looked expensive but felt weightless. Elias had found it in the day's mail pile, wedged between a vendor catalog and a water service invoice. No return address, just V. Dalton handwritten in a careful serifed script. Inside, a single sheet of thick bond paper. Elias didn't open it until Virginia walked in from her morning round. She wiped dew off her boots with a rag, hung her coat on the same peg it had lived on for decades, and poured her tea. Elias sat at her desk, letter already in hand. It's from Peter, he said. Virginia didn't flinch. Of course it is. He unfolded the letter and began to read. Dear Virginia, I'm writing not with expectation, but with acknowledgement. I regret how things unfolded between us. While I cannot alter the past, I hope time softens our respective positions. Please know this was never personal. Business and family are messy lines. I've always respected what you built, perhaps more than I showed. Wishing you peace and continued success. Peter Cobb. Elias folded the paper slowly, neatly. No emotion on his face. No apology, he said. Just regret. Wrapped in a thesaurus, Virginia replied. She didn't take the letter. Instead, she walked to the filing cabinet behind her desk, pulled open the bottom drawer labeled MISC, correspondence, and reached for a manila folder tucked at the back. She slid the letter inside, closed the drawer. That's the legacy dustbin, she said. Coulter named it. Back in '94, Elias smirked. Didn't know it was still open for business. Virginia looked at him. Apparently, some people keep applying. Coulter came by that afternoon. He brought fresh sourdough and a bottle of elderflower tonic, which he left on the catering prep table like offerings. Hannah waved from across the room but didn't interrupt. She'd learned to let the old guard speak in their own time. Virginia handed him a mug. Peter sent a letter. Coulter raised an eyebrow. Apology? Not exactly. He waited. He regrets how things unfolded. Says it wasn't personal. Coulter sipped. He's still protecting his ego. Virginia sat back in her chair. Good. It'll keep him warm when the legacy is gone. Coulter laughed. Deep, quiet, unhurried. You ever miss being underestimated? He asked. Only on tax days. That night, Virginia was still in the office when Hannah came by, hair damp from an evening rainstorm. Clipboard tucked under one arm. She didn't sit. Just stood in the doorway like she was measuring her words. I heard about the letter, she said. Virginia didn't look up from her ledger. Not worth the ink it was printed with. I know, Hannah said. I read it. Virginia finally glanced up. You went digging. I was curious. Virginia gave a non-committal shrug. He called it messy lines, Hannah said. Like you were just an accounting error. Virginia didn't reply. Hannah stepped forward. You didn't need their thanks. But I'll say it anyway. She set down a slip of paper, just a small square, scribbled in Hannah's handwriting. It read, Thank you for making sure I knew the difference between being invited and being included. Virginia blinked once, then folded the paper and slid it into the front pocket of her ledger. Not filed, not archived, kept. Later, after the building emptied out and the rain softened to mist, Virginia sat at the front desk with the lights low. The letter was still in the drawer, filed and closed. The real words, Hannah's, were within reach. Outside, the porch light flickered, catching on wet brick. She didn't look at the past tonight. She didn't have to. It had already taught her everything she needed to teach forward. The announcement was made in a single post. No press release. No media push. Just a soft photo, Virginia in denim and boots, standing beside Hannah on a gravel patch of undeveloped earth. Oak trees casting wide shade behind them. Coming 2026, the Hartwell Grove, a non-profit event space for couples who deserve the same magic, without the price tag. The caption was signed simply, VD. It took less than a day for the news to ripple. Vendors tagged it, brides reshared it. Local nonprofits reached out to partner. And Melissa saw it somewhere between her third cappuccino and her midday Pilates class, the post glowing on her screen like a flare. She hadn't known. No one had told her, because it wasn't hers to know. Virginia hadn't meant for it to be a surprise, but she'd also never made it a secret. She'd bought the land 15 years earlier, back when the parcel behind the original venue was still considered mosquito country by developers. Nothing but overgrowth and rumor. 5 acres of maybe, she'd called it. Now it was worth 10 times what she'd paid for it, and she still didn't plan to sell. Hannah had found out only a month ago. She'd been filing invoices when she spotted the deed tucked inside a leather folio marked Grove, VD Holdings. Her hands had stilled over the page. When she looked up, Virginia was already in the doorway. "I bought it before you were born," she said. "Didn't know what for. Just knew I'd need it." Hannah blinked. "And now?" Virginia had walked to the window, watched the light fall across the old gravel road that led nowhere. For now. "Now I know," she said. "There should be a place for people who never thought they'd get one." They broke ground 2 weeks later. No hard hats, no photographers, just a few staff, some chalk lines, and Elias with a clipboard. He was the one who handed Hannah the formal contract. Director of Operations, it read. Her name in bold, her signature below Virginia's, the date already typed in. She'd stared at it too long, unsure if it was real. "You earned it," Virginia said. "Now build it." Inside the venue's back office, Elias brought in the final paperwork at noon on a Tuesday. His suit was pressed, his voice low. "I've finalized everything," he said, setting the will on the desk like it was sacred. Virginia nodded, flipping through page after page of precise, unbreakable instructions. The venue, the land, the grove, every clause airtight. Hannah's name on each future designation, no ambiguities, no room for contest. Elias cleared his throat. "You don't want to leave anything open," Virginia closed the folder. "No," she said. "I'm done leaving gaps for people to crawl through." That evening, as the sun dipped past the edge of the trees, Virginia and Hannah stood on the newly leveled ground. The soil still smelled of roots and stone. In the distance, someone had placed a single folding chair under the tallest oak, just to check shade coverage for future ceremonies. It looked like it belonged there, like it had been waiting. Hannah exhaled. "I don't think I would have done this 5 years ago." "You wouldn't have," Virginia replied. Hannah glanced sideways. "You didn't doubt me?" Virginia smiled faintly. "I didn't need to believe in you before you did. I just needed to make sure there was a place for you when you did." They walked the perimeter together. No clipboard, no plan, just vision. Somewhere across town, Melissa refreshed her feed again. She saw the post a second time, this time reshared by a venue she'd once tried to outbid for a wedding package. The caption read, "Legacy that builds forward. This is how you do it." Her fingers hovered over the comment box, then retreated. There was nothing left to claim, no seat to take back, not this time. Back in the venue's main hallway, just before locking up, Virginia passed by the fireplace. The plaque was still there, brass gleaming softly in the low light. She ran her fingers along the edge, then turned toward the door. Hannah was waiting. "Ready to go?" she asked. Virginia nodded once. "Let's go walk what we've written." They stepped out into the night. The house behind them didn't just remember anymore, it expanded. It was a Tuesday morning in March. The venue was quiet, no music, no vendors, no scent of peonies or pan-seared appetizers trailing from the tasting kitchen. Just filtered light through old windows and the echo of movement being prepared. In the far left corner of the reception hall, where the kitchen tent used to stand, a bench now sat beneath the wall of windows. Hand-carved walnut, curved armrests, no cushion, it didn't need one. The initials VD were engraved into the right leg. No flourish, just truth. Virginia sat there now, boots on polished pine, one hand resting on her cane, not because she needed it today, but because it reminded her of what she'd stood through. The room hummed softly. Hannah had insisted the team leave a few candles lit, even though no event was scheduled. For continuity, she'd said. But Virginia knew the gesture was for more than ambiance. It was reverence. One by one, the staff came. No speeches, no ceremony, just a steady drift of footsteps across the floorboards, some hesitant, some sure. The florist's apprentice was first. She didn't say much, just held out a small white bloom and nodded. "From my first wedding here," she whispered. "You made room for people like me." Virginia took it without a word and tucked it into the crook of her arm. Then came the kitchen porter, the groundskeeper, the lighting tech with the sleeve tattoo and the chipped tooth. Each one approached the bench like they were stepping into a pew. They said thank you in different ways, through words or silence, or shared memory. Some just touched the bench and kept walking. Each moment landed, not heavy, just permanent. Hannah came last. She didn't carry flowers, just a small brushed brass plaque the size of an index card. She knelt beside the bench, toolkit in hand, and fastened it to the backrest with 2 short screws. She said nothing until it was done, then stepped back and read it aloud. Founder, mother, quiet owner. Virginia looked at it, then at Hannah. Too much? Not enough. They sat together for a while, not touching, not talking, just listening to the room breathe. Outside, the light shifted, soft gold trailing down the walls like memory made visible. Melissa's name wasn't spoken. Peter's was gone entirely. Time had a way of writing out the parts that never built anything. The air held only what belonged. Eventually, Hannah stood. "I should check the front," she said. "Bride's family is dropping off favors." Virginia nodded. "Leave the door unlocked." "You sure?" Virginia smiled faintly. "They know who this place belongs to now." Hannah hesitated at the edge of the room. Then, "Do you want me to keep the bench roped off during events?" Virginia shook her head. "Let them sit." "You okay with that?" "I built the room," Virginia said. "But they're the ones who'll fill it." Hannah smiled and left her there, alone but never unattended. After a while, Virginia looked down at the plaque, ran her fingers across the words. She thought of the folding chair once shoved by the kitchen tent, the seat no one offered, the silence they mistook for surrender. And she smiled, because this seat, this one had been carved, not granted, not borrowed, not begged for. Carved by her own hands, and it held the whole room.